The black vastness is closer than you think. Every human, whether standing on the softest beach or sleeping miles inland, lives under the silent tyranny of the sea. For all our concrete triumphs and digital delusions, the deep ocean remains the ultimate void, a crushing, lightless, impossibly cold entity that covers the majority of our world. We call it Earth, but it is truly a water world, and we have barely touched its surface. This is where primal fear takes root, where the civilized mind encounters the raw, unreasoning chaos that underlies all existence. When the lights of the land fade behind the horizon, the sea ceases to be a resource or a boundary. It transforms into a sentient, chaotic force, demanding respect and often exacting a terrible price. Modern navigators, just like the ancients who sailed by constellations in prayer, understand this terrifying truth. The water doesn't care about your plans, your safety protocols, or your life. It simply waits, massive and patient, for human error or perhaps for something far worse. The early civilizations instinctively understood the ocean not as a physical place, but as a mythological battleground. For the Sumerians and the Babylonians, the sea was the terrifying Tiamat, the dragon of primordial salt water whose very existence embodied the unruly spirit of chaos and creation. To placate her, sacrifices were necessary, not merely to avoid a storm, but to acknowledge the profound existential threat she represented. The northern sagas spoke of Jormungandr, the world serpent, a monstrous coil encircling the entire globe, ensuring that the boundaries between the known and the chaotic were always guarded by impossible, serpentine might. The very act of sailing beyond the sight of land was, in effect, entering the domain of the great serpent. For the Norse and the Celts, the depths were a realm populated by demons, grotesque sea serpents, and entities whose forms were based on impossible crushing pressures and eternal darkness. These stories were not mere fanciful tales. They were psychic maps drawn by sailors who had seen the sheer inhuman scale of the waves and felt the unnerving isolation of the open water. They knew that beyond the coast lay a realm where laws of man and even nature sometimes seemed to dissolve. This primal dread was codified into navigation itself. It is no coincidence that early cartographers, when charting the vast unexplored sections of the map, wrote the chilling warning, "Hic sunt dracones," here be dragons, often accompanied by illustrations of colossal unseen creatures emerging from the swell. The ancient Carthaginian navigator Hanno, or perhaps Himilco, spoke of the deep not merely being home to fish, but to monsters that slithered beneath the hulls of ships, their presence felt as a vibration or an uneasy shift in the water. In the 18th century, the missionary Hans Egede's account of a creature seen off the coast of Greenland described a wrinkled, humped body longer than the ship itself, seen clearly enough to be documented, but alien enough to immediately enter the registry of dread. Even as technology advanced, bringing sonar, satellite navigation, and steel hulls, the unsettling reports persisted, validated by the discovery of genuinely immense life forms. The sheer size of the largest known marine life, the blue whale, the nearly 30-foot-long colossal squid, or the armored leatherback turtle, confirms that immense, terrifying creatures genuinely exist just beneath the surface. It requires no great leap of imagination to understand how a glimpsed shadow in the fog, a massive dark shape disappearing beneath a wave, could become the kraken, the leviathan, or the monstrous serpent. The known world is unsettling enough, particularly when considering the life forms that exist solely in the Hadal zone, the deepest trenches, evolving under pressures that would instantly crush a land-dwelling organism. The sea is a realm of infinite cold adaptation. But the true horror begins where science ends, specifically with the phenomenon of the derelict vessel, or the ghost ship. The ghost ship is the ocean's most unnerving calling card. It is a lifeboat-sized canvas of terror, a floating monument to an impossible vanishing act, often found in near-perfect condition. For centuries, sailors have stumbled upon vessels perfectly adrift, sails set, lights burning, food on the table, but completely devoid of crew. Consider the unsettling domesticity of these scenes. In 2007, the Australian yacht Kaz II was found floating near the Great Barrier Reef. The engine was running, a laptop was open, the table was set for a meal, and life vests were still stowed in their racks. The three men were gone. The only sign of disorder was a slightly torn sail, easily explained by a squall. Yet, for three experienced sailors to abandon a fully functional, well-stocked vessel in mild weather, without deploying any distress signal or even grabbing their personal flotation devices, speaks to a sudden, overwhelming, and non-maritime threat. The scene suggests that everyday life was interrupted instantaneously, leaving a sense of uncanny vacuum. This mirrors the case of the MV Joyita, a merchant boat discovered floating in the Pacific 60 years earlier. Its 25 passengers and crew were entirely missing. While the Joyita had some damage, a partially flooded engine room, the lifeboats were also gone. However, the cargo, including medical supplies and timber, was still aboard, and the radio was set to the international distress frequency, yet no distress call was ever received. The critical point is that these vanishings defy the internal logic of seafaring. A ship is a fortress. A crew would only abandon it as a last resort. And such an abandonment would be preceded by hours of struggle, radio calls, and the gathering of essential survival gear. When none of this is present, it points toward a force that operates on a timescale too rapid, or a psychological register too overwhelming for rational human response. The immediate impulse of a non-sailor is to rationalize these disappearances as accidents, a sudden rogue wave, a poorly executed transfer, or a freak medical incident. But the mariner, hardened by exposure and solitude, knows better. They have seen things. They have witnessed phenomena that defy the physics of the dry world. This forms the unwritten code of the waves, a superstition rooted in shared, inexplicable encounters. Reports of strange, intensely bright lights moving with impossible speed above and beneath the waves are common, often described in detail by multiple crew members, dismissing the easy excuse of drunken fancy. These unidentified submerged objects, USOs, move in ways no known submersible or aircraft can, often performing sharp right-angle turns deep underwater. They speak of fleeting, unnatural shapes in the open water, humanoid figures that glide, not swim, always disappearing the moment a ship closes the distance, leaving behind only the profound existential dread that comes from encountering something that should not exist. These are not tales from a bygone age. Modern commercial sailors use online forums, often anonymously, to share encounters with entities and events that neither their training nor their extensive experience can reconcile with reality. The encounters share a consistent psychological footprint, a sense of profound foreboding, a feeling of being watched, and the immediate overwhelming impulse to never speak of the event, lest speaking make it too real. The sea is not just deep, it is secretive, and what it guards is profoundly unsettling. It acts as a selective memory, erasing the crew while leaving the ship, preserving the unsettling canvas of the mystery. The routine of the open ocean is a deliberate shield against the void. On colossal container ships, weeks are measured in shifts, engine noise, and the predictable rhythm of the waves. The human mind seeks pattern, repetition, and certainty to manage the overwhelming scale of the environment. It is in this manufactured monotony that the mind is most vulnerable to intrusion, particularly when that certainty is violently stripped away. In the late 1990s, the container ship Pacific Dawn was on a standard crossing of the North Atlantic when its journey devolved into a collective psychological siege. The account, shared by a seasoned veteran named Ian Michaels, speaks to the fragility of human certainty when confronted by a shared, inexplicable event. The trouble began with the arrival of the fog, not a typical manageable mist, but a bank of sea fog of abnormal, unnerving density, a gray, gelatinous wall that advanced and then swallowed the entire vessel. Michaels immediately noticed the shift. The fog was so thick it didn't just obscure sight, it possessed an uncanny sound-absorbing quality, muting the customary crash of the hull against the water, dampening the powerful thrum of the engine until the world outside the ship's railing seemed to cease existing. This sensory deprivation, This sudden acoustic deadening is the first psychological trigger, creating an isolation chamber of the mind. The crew instinctively felt the change, an almost psychic consensus that the ship had entered a space where the rules of the sea were suspended. Visibility dropped to mere meters, reducing the entire world to a cramped, isolated space of 20 meters around the ship. Then, the silence broke. A sound rose from the abyss, a low, resonant, guttural growl so deep it was felt more than heard, vibrating through the massive steel structure of the hull. It was an infrasound, a frequency lower than human hearing can easily process, known to induce feelings of anxiety, fear, and panic. Michael's first thought was a mechanical malfunction or a scrape against submerged rock, but the growling repeated, closer. This time accompanied by massive, deliberate splashes, the slow, heavy displacement of water by something of immense bulk. This was not the playful motion of dolphins or the surfacing of a whale. It was the motion of an indifferent, colossal entity. Crucially, the sound seemed to originate from all sides, from the bow, then the stern, then the port side, suggesting the Pacific Dawn, a vessel weighing 150,000 deadweight tons, was being slowly, deliberately circled. For what felt like 10 to 15 minutes, the ship crawled through the unnatural quiet, assaulted by these deep shudders and close, scraping vibrations that confirmed something solid and monstrous was grazing the hull. The constant low vibration felt throughout the entire structure indicated a physical interaction with something dense and massive. Around 20 professional mariners stood on deck, paralyzed by the experience. No one spoke, the captain, the helmsman, the veteran crew. They simply stood and waited for the invisible, enormous thing to emerge. This is the definition of a shared paranormal encounter, where multiple independent observers, none under unusual individual stress, witness the same inexplicable event. Skeptics suggest marine acoustics, whale songs, shifting plates, were amplified by the dense fog, playing tricks on the men's ears. However, this fails to account for the powerful, prolonged physical vibrations felt through the thick steel hull. The incident ended when the sun finally pierced the thinning mist, and the crew, shaken from their shared trance, instinctively reverted to silence. The sonar logs, later reviewed, showed nothing. The absence of evidence was itself the final unnerving confirmation that they had encountered something outside the parameters of normal marine life. The experience dissolved into the unspoken code of the sea, leaving the crew with the profound realization that the entity circling them was likely larger than their metallic sanctuary. Physical proof, however, can be more terrifying than a shared auditory hallucination because it eliminates the convenient escape of psychological projection. The Gulf of Alaska, an unforgiving region nicknamed the Alaska Triangle, is notorious for its meteorological violence and high frequency of ship vanishings. It was here, aboard a repurposed 75-foot military landing craft, an LCM-8, towing a massive barge, that a crew experienced a terror that was undeniably physical. The LCM, burdened by the 220-foot barge, was crawling at barely 4 knots through one of the world's most unpredictable waters when a catastrophic storm engulfed them. Battered by days of rolling and pitching at angles exceeding 30 degrees, the crew fought to stay alive and keep the vessel afloat after the barge's towline snapped, tearing a hole in the engine room. They were at the absolute limit of human endurance, focused purely on survival. On the third night of the storm, amidst the chaotic roar of wind and waves, a deafening boom rocked the vessel, shaking it from bow to stern. All power failed. Navigation systems went dark. The Lauren navigation signal was lost, the radio was dead, and all electrical breakers tripped. They were left dead in the water, stripped of their technological defenses. The initial, frantic check found no immediate flooding or hull breach, suggesting they hadn't struck another vessel. When the sun finally appeared over calm seas, the crew was confronted with a piece of impossible physical evidence. The ship's mast, a 4-inch thick reinforced steel beam that supported antennas and navigation lights, was gone. It had been twisted off at a perfect 90-degree angle, some 25 feet above the waterline. The heavy reinforced steel plate bolting it to the deck was warped, as if an immense articulated force had wrenched the structure from the roof and discarded it. Experienced mariners know that even the most extreme rogue wave is unlikely to inflict such surgical, twisting damage without completely capsizing or shattering the wheelhouse. A rogue wave imparts immense force over a broad surface area, typically crushing or flooding a vessel. The concentrated twisting force required to shear a reinforced steel mast suggests a deliberate, localized grip. The inescapable conclusion, shared silently by the hardened fishermen, was that something massive, something impossibly strong, had reached out of the storm-tossed water and broken off the steel mast. They were victims of a collision, not with another ship, but with an entity whose strength transcended the natural forces of the storm, leaving behind a grim, undeniable trophy of the encounter. The most chilling category of maritime mystery is the solitary psychological breakdown leading to a disappearance. Yet, even in isolation, the elements of the unnerving unknown persist, suggesting that the mind may be the only witness to a cosmic, not merely terrestrial, horror. Isidoro Arias, a 49-year-old Spanish pilot, had spent 2 years circumnavigating the globe solo aboard his 47-foot sailboat, the Islero. He was a veteran, an experienced navigator, and by all accounts not a superstitious man. His journey was meticulous and well documented until the final week of his trip in March 2003, as he neared the final leg home. The descent into dread began with a failing engine and the subsequent loss of electricity, the loss of contact. But it was not the storm or the solitude that terrified him. It was the presence of a whale and its calf. He messaged his son that the whales weren't merely swimming nearby. They were actively tracking him, their coordinated, persistent presence unsettling him in a way no previous encounter had. This suggests a profound cognitive dissonance. His experience told him whales were benign, but their behavior communicated a predatory or intentional focus. 3 days later, the final fragmented communication arrived. Arias sounded erratic, paranoid, and utterly panicked, telling his son that something had been climbing aboard his boat at night. He described them as small, humanoid figures, moving unnaturally, always lurking just out of sight in the darkness. This was the last time anyone heard his voice. The description is crucial. Small, humanoid, and unnatural movement. Weeks later, the Islero was discovered drifting aimlessly near the Gulf of Guinea off the coast of Nigeria. Authorities found no sign of damage, no blood, no struggle. The cabin was spotless, his passport and money untouched. The scene was one of domestic calm, except for 2 unnerving details. The inflatable dinghy was missing, but its essential outboard motor was still secured on board in the ship's logbook. The missing motor defies logic. An experienced sailor would never abandon ship without the means to propel the lifeboat. This suggests a panicked, immediate flight where the fear of the entity was so overwhelming that the sailor focused only on immediate removal from the hull, abandoning the secondary rational tool for safety. The final entry in the ship's logbook, written in shaky, nearly illegible script, only deepened the psychological horror. The single sentence read, "Something is climbing up the hole." The natural explanations are always offered first: stress, isolation, dehydration, or a tropical illness like malaria, leading to a hallucinatory breakdown. But why, after 2 years of successful calm navigation, would a veteran suddenly succumb to paranoia only days from home, fixating on a highly specific, unusual threat? Medical experts suggest that true visual or auditory hallucinations stemming from exhaustion or dehydration are typically disorganized and nonspecific. Arias's account was specific, small, unnatural, climbing. This leaves the unknown. Current estimates state that over 80% of the world's oceans remain unexplored, at least in the depths. This immense dark volume could host entire ecosystems and species that have never been observed. Could the Pacific Dawn have stalled in the hunting ground of a massive, acoustically silent creature that scraped its hull? Could the Alaskan LCM have had its steel mast snapped by the powerful appendage of an undiscovered leviathan? A A creature that breaches the surface only during the chaos of the fiercest storms? Yet, Arias's story stands apart due to the humanoid description and the initial fixation on the whales. If the creatures were marine life, why were they not described in cetacean or cephalopodic terms? The focus shifts from the unknown species of biology to the unknown entities of cryptophysics or transdimensional theory. The most disturbing possibility is that the sea conceals not just unknown life, but unknown realities. Ancient texts often describe the sea as a place of passage. What if the fog bank the Pacific Dawn entered was not a natural atmospheric condition, but a temporary rupture, a thin spot between dimensions? A space where an entity from another, more terrifying reality briefly reached into our world, causing a shared psychological incident and leaving no trace? The sounds and vibrations were not of Earth, but of a monstrous form moving in an environment outside our dimensional laws. And what if Isidoro Arias encountered something similar? His initial fear of the whales suggests a misidentification of an unidentified submerged object, USO. Perhaps a vehicle so large it was mistaken for a whale and its calf, or a craft deliberately masking itself among marine life. The small humanoid figures climbing aboard would then be the occupants of this submerged vehicle. The description is far removed from folklore like sirens or mermaids. It is closer to the classic descriptions of extraterrestrial beings. Ufologists have long speculated that the immense, lightless depths of the ocean would be the ideal place for an off-world entity to establish a base, hidden from terrestrial surveillance. If the ocean contains these areas of dimensional thinness, these portals, it could also explain the phenomenon of the ghost ship. Could the sailors who vanish without a trace step into a temporary dimensional tear, becoming stranded in a space between worlds, leaving only their functional empty ships to return? The Islero's final panicked log entry, "Something is climbing up the hole," is the last echo of a man confronting a horror that defied every rule of his known world, a horror that required immediate illogical flight from the hull itself. The ocean has always been vast and unpredictable. While science offers us logical explanations for many of the world's oldest maritime phenomena, there are still stories that refuse to fit neatly into reason. As modern mysteries, the experiences of the Pacific Dawn, the Alaskan LCM-8, and the Islero continue to pose new questions, many of which seem to have no answers. Were the people in question victims of natural forces and tricks of the mind, or did they encounter something that defies all explanation? Ancient writers describe the sea as a place of passage. Most of us have accepted that to mean the act of moving from one landmass to another. But what if the ocean is also a passage to a realm between the known and the unknown, where people vanish, ships drift empty, and things move beneath the surface of the water that are too frightening to be named? The sea waits, vast and silent. It holds its secrets in the dark. And every ship that sails upon it is merely a visitor in a realm that belongs to something else. If this deep dive into maritime terror has left you questioning the solitude of your own world, then take a moment to look into the void. What is the most unsettling, inexplicable encounter you've ever heard of or experienced, on land or at sea? Share your story in the comments below and let the rest of us know. What true horror do you believe lies unseen?